The guards' spears crossed before my chest, their crystalline tips humming with barely contained energy. "You cannot enter," the taller one said, his 4 eyes narrowing at the diplomatic badge hanging from my neck. "The Empress receives no one on this day." I had spent 3 months learning Valori customs, memorizing their 17 forms of formal address, studying the precise angles of respectful bows. None of that mattered now. What mattered was the data fragment I had intercepted 2 days ago, a routine communication between palace servants that had stopped me cold. "K, anniversary passes again. No celebration. No acknowledgement. As always. 200 years." That was how long Empress Selahari had ruled the Valori Dominion. And for 200 years, not a single soul had wished her well on the day of her emergence into existence. "I carry a message from the Terran delegation," I said, which was technically true. I was the Terran delegation, a single junior attaché sent to a dying outpost of a dying empire, because Earth couldn't spare anyone important for what the Council considered a courtesy posting. "Leave your message with the reception. Leave your message with the reception." Chamber. The Empress. The message is verbal, personal, time-sensitive. The guards exchanged glances. I recognized the subtle shift in their posture, uncertainty. The Valori were a species of rigid protocols, and I had just presented them with a scenario their training hadn't covered. The shorter guard pressed a finger to the communicator embedded in his temple. A moment of silence. Then his face went pale, or rather, the luminescent patterns beneath his lavender skin dimmed significantly. "You may enter," he said, stepping aside. "The Empress will see you." The throne room stretched before me like a cathedral of ice and starlight. Pillars of frozen crystal rose toward a ceiling lost in darkness, and at the far end, upon a throne carved from a single massive gemstone, sat the most isolated being in the known galaxy. Empress Selahari was ancient by human standards, though her species aged differently, and she appeared no older than a woman in her prime. Her skin held the same lavender tint as her guards, but where theirs pulsed with warm light, hers had grown dim. Her silver hair cascaded down her shoulders like frozen waterfalls, and her eyes, all 6 of them, arranged in a crown around her forehead, fixed upon me with an expression I couldn't read. "A human," she said. Her voice echoed through the empty chamber. "How curious. I was told your kind had forgotten we existed." I walked forward, ignoring the protocol that demanded I prostrate myself at the entrance. My boots echoed against the crystalline floor. 50 meters. 40. 30. "You should stop there," she said. "My guards will kill you if you approach closer. Your guards are outside, Majesty. I could kill you myself. You could." I kept walking. 20 meters. 10. "But you won't." I stopped at the base of her throne, close enough to see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. Close enough to see that beneath the imperial mask, she was simply tired. "Why are you here, human? What message could your people possibly have for the Valori that couldn't wait for proper channels?" I reached into my jacket pocket. Her hand twitched, a defensive reflex, but I moved slowly, deliberately. I pulled out a small object, wrapped in synthetic silk. "No one had told her happy birthday in 200 years, I said quietly. I thought that should change. Her eyes, all 6 of them, widened. The light beneath her skin flickered erratically. "What did you say?" I unwrapped the silk to reveal a small cake, barely larger than my palm, hastily assembled from the limited ingredients available in my quarters. Blue frosting, because I had read that Valori associated the color with joy. A single candle, unlit. "Happy birthday, Majesty." The silence that followed seemed to freeze the air itself. Empress Selahari stared at the cake as if I had presented her with a live explosive. Then slowly, her lower hands, the ones she kept hidden beneath her robes, rose to cover her mouth. "This is..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "You... How did you..." I intercepted a communication. Accidentally. I held out the cake. I know it's not much. I know it breaks about 17 different protocols. But, where I come from, no one should spend their birthday alone. "You do not know what you have done," she whispered. "To approach me uninvited, to address me without proper forms, to offer a gift without presenting it through the Ministry of Imperial Gifts. I know exactly what I've done, Majesty. I've committed approximately 32 violations of Valori court etiquette. I smiled slightly, but I've also done something no one else has done in 2 centuries. I've acknowledged that you exist as something more than a title. Her composure cracked. It was subtle, a trembling of her shoulders, a deepening of the color beneath her skin, but I saw it. Leave, she said. Her voice had lost its imperial resonance. Leave now, before I forget that your species has diplomatic immunity. I set the cake on the lowest step of her throne and bowed, not the elaborate prostration her protocols demanded, but a simple human bow of respect. Happy birthday, Empress Salahari. I hope the next 200 years bring you more than silence. I turned and walked away. I made it 3 steps before her voice stopped me. Human.tl. I looked back. She had picked up the cake. Her lower hands cradled it like something precious and breakable. In that moment, she didn't look like an empress. She looked like a woman who had just remembered what it felt like to be seen. What is your name, Marcus Cole, Majesty? Junior Diplomatic Attaché, Terranin Embassy. Marcus Cole, she repeated. The syllables sounded strange in her accent, but she spoke them carefully, as if committing them to memory. You should not have done this. Probably not. You will face consequences. Probably. And now you will face consequences. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something other than imperial detachment in their depths. Thank you. The words were barely audible, but they were there. I nodded once and walked out of the throne room, leaving the Empress of the Valori Dominion holding a lopsided cake and crying for the first time in 200 years. The summons arrived 3 days later. I had spent those 3 days waiting for guards to appear at my quarters, for diplomatic notes demanding my expulsion, for any of the consequences Empress Salahari had warned me about. Instead, I received silence, and then a single crystalline token delivered by a nervous functionary who refused to meet my eyes. You are to attend the Empress in her private study, he said. Immediately. The private study was smaller than I expected, intimate even. Shelves lined with crystalline data tablets covered the walls, and a window of transparent ice offered a view of the frozen mountains beyond the palace. The Empress stood with her back to me, gazing out at the landscape. She wore no crown today, no ceremonial robes, just a simple gown of deep blue that made the patterns beneath her skin glow more brightly. Close the door, she said without turning. I obeyed. I have been Empress for 203 years, she continued. In that time, I have received exactly 472 assassination attempts, 17 coup attempts, and 3 declarations of war, or die. I have been betrayed by advisors, abandoned by allies, and feared by my own people. She turned to face me. No one has ever given me a birthday present. That seems like a significant oversight. It is not an oversight, Marcus Cole. It is policy. She moved toward a seating area near the window and gestured for me to sit. Valori do not celebrate individual existence. The concept is considered selfish. To acknowledge one's birth is to place personal significance above collective duty. I sat across from her, noting the unusual informality of the arrangement. No throne, no elevated position, just 2 beings on equal seating. That sounds lonely, I said. It is efficient. But her voice carried no conviction. Personal attachments cloud judgment. Emotional bonds create vulnerabilities. A ruler must be above such things. And how has that worked out for you? Her eyes flickered. A flash of something that might have been anger, or might have been pain. You are remarkably direct for a diplomat. I'm a remarkably bad diplomat. That's why they sent me here, to the declining outpost of a fading empire. She tilted her head. Your superiors view this posting as punishment. My superiors view this posting as irrelevant. There's a difference, is there? I leaned forward. Punishment implies they care enough to be angry. Irrelevance means they've simply forgotten that I exist, that you exist, that any of this matters. Salahari was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its formal cadence. Why did you really come to my throne room, Marcus Cole? Not the diplomatic explanation. The truth. I considered lying. I considered a dozen polished responses that would preserve professional distance and diplomatic protocol. But something in her eyes, the same raw honesty I had glimpsed when she held that ridiculous cake, demanded better. Because I know what it's like to be invisible, I said. To exist in a space where no one sees you as a person, just a function, a role to be filled. I paused. I spent 3 years on a research station in the outer colonies. 67 crew members. Not once did anyone ask how I was, what I wanted, whether I was happy. I met her gaze. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need that kind of acknowledgement. And then one day I looked in the mirror and couldn't remember the last time I had smiled. Selahari's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. You speak of isolation as if it were a sickness. Isn't it? For humans, perhaps. My species is different. We do not require. She stopped. Her lower hands, hidden beneath her robes, were trembling again. We are not supposed to require, but you do. The words hung in the air between us. Outside, wind howled against the window, sending patterns of frost spiraling across the transparent surface. I have ruled alone for 2 centuries, Selahari said quietly. I have made decisions that shaped the fates of billions. I have watched stars die and civilizations crumble. I have outlived everyone who knew me before I took this throne. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the full weight of those years in her eyes. I was not always alone, Marcus Cole. Once, long ago, I had a partner, a mate, in your terms. He was killed during the 3rd coup attempt. After that, I decided that attachment was a liability I could not afford. I'm sorry. Do not be. It was 2 centuries ago. The grief has long since faded into absence. Absence isn't the same as healing. Her eyes narrowed. You presume to understand my emotional state? No. But I understand absence. I stood, moving toward the window. The frozen mountains stretched toward the horizon, beautiful and utterly desolate. I lost my sister during the Proxima incident. She was the only family I had left. After she died, I filled the space she left with work, with duty, with anything that kept me too busy to feel. I turned back to face her. It took me 5 years to realize that I hadn't stopped feeling. I had just stopped admitting it. Selahari rose from her chair. She was taller than me, most Valori were, but she moved toward me without any of the imperial bearing I had seen in the throne room. Just a woman approaching another person. Why you're telling me this? Because you asked for the truth. No one tells me the truth, not in 2 centuries, then maybe that's the problem. I held her gaze. You've surrounded yourself with people who are too afraid to see you as anything other than a symbol, and you've convinced yourself that you're too powerful to need anything else. I took a breath. But you kept the cake, didn't you? Her composure cracked again, just a fraction. How did you know? Because if it was just protocol, just etiquette, just a minor breach of diplomatic convention, you would have thrown it away. You would have punished me. You would have moved on. I stepped closer, but instead, you invited me here. To this room, where you don't wear your crown. To ask me questions that have nothing to do with diplomacy. Selahari stood very still. The patterns beneath her skin were pulsing rapidly now, shifting through colors I couldn't name. You are either the bravest human I have ever encountered, she said slowly, or the most foolish, probably both. And then, for the first time in 200 years, Empress Selahari smiled. The assassination attempt came 3 weeks later. I had become a regular presence in the Empress's private study by then. Not officially, of course. Officially, I was still a junior attaché handling minor administrative matters between our governments. But unofficially, I spent my evenings in that small room with the ice windows, talking with Selahari about everything from galactic politics to the comparative merits of human and Valori cuisine. She was brilliant, I discovered. Wickedly intelligent, with a dry wit that emerged more frequently as she grew comfortable in my presence. And beneath the imperial mask, she was curious, endlessly, ravenously curious about everything human. Our history, our arts, our strange customs of celebration and mourning and connection. You truly sing to your dying, she asked one evening, her tea growing cold in her hands. Sometimes. Depends on the culture. Some sing, some pray, some just hold hands and tell stories. And this brings comfort? I think so. The person dying knows they're not alone, that they mattered enough for someone to stay. She had looked away then, her eyes distant. The Valori die alone. It is considered the final dignity, to release one's hold on existence without burdening others. That sounds less like dignity and more like abandonment. Perhaps. Her voice was soft. Perhaps I have confused the two for longer than I knew. That was the night she first touched me, just a brush of her fingers against mine, so light I almost didn't register it. But I saw the way her patterns flared at the contact, the slight catch in her breath. Sorry, she said, pulling back. I should not have. It's all right. I kept my hand where it was, open, available. In my culture, that would be considered friendly, and in mine, it would be considered the opening movement of a bonding proposal. I stared at her. You're joking. Valori do not joke about bonding. But there was a hint of amusement in her eyes. I should have warned you. Physical contact between our species is charged. I'll keep that in mind. See that you do, Marcus Cole. I would hate for you to accidentally propose marriage. It was a joke. I knew it was a joke. But something in the way she said it, the careful lightness, the quick look away, made me wonder if it was entirely a joke after all. The assassin struck the next evening. I had arrived early, carrying a bottle of earth wine I had saved from my diplomatic supplies. The study door was open, unusual, since Selahari was meticulous about privacy. I stepped inside and found her locked in combat with a figure in black, their movements almost too fast to follow. The Empress was holding her own, but she was wounded, a deep gash across her upper arm, dark purple blood staining her gown. The assassin had some kind of energy blade, and they were pushing her back toward the window. I didn't think. I just moved. The decorative ice sculpture on Selahari's desk was heavy, heavy enough that when I swung it at the assassin's head, it connected with a satisfying crack. The assassin stumbled, and Selahari seized the moment, driving her palm into their chest. A flash of light, and the assassin crumpled. Marcus! She caught me as I staggered, my improvised weapon clattering to the floor. What are you? You should not have. Are you all right? I was checking her wound, my hands trembling. You're bleeding. You need. It is nothing. Surface damage only. She gripped my wrist, pulling my attention to her face. You attacked a trained assassin, with a decorative sculpture. What were you thinking? I wasn't thinking. I saw you in danger and I trailed off, suddenly aware of how close we were standing, of the way her hand was still wrapped around my wrist, of the rapid pulse of light beneath her skin. You could have been killed, she whispered. Why would you risk yourself for me? Why wouldn't I? She stared at me as if I had spoken in a language she didn't understand. Then her eyes shifted to the fallen assassin, and her expression hardened. This will not be the last attempt. They know about you, about us. The faction that opposes my rule has found a new angle of attack. She released my wrist and stepped back. You need to leave. Return to Earth. Get as far from me as possible. No, Dati. This is not a request, Marcus. This is an imperial command. And I'm not your subject. I moved toward her again, and this time I was the one who reached out. I took her hand, her upper right hand, the one she usually kept clenched at her side, and held it gently. I'm not leaving you alone to face this. You don't understand. If they cannot strike at me directly, they will strike at you. They will use you against me. They will. I understand perfectly. You found something that matters to you beyond duty, and that terrifies you more than any assassin ever could. Her patterns flared violently, cycling through a spectrum of colors I had never seen. Her other hands rose as if to push me away, but instead they settled on my shoulders, trembling. This cannot work, she said. My people would never accept a human consort. Your people would never understand a union with an alien empress. The political ramifications alone, Selahari. I said her name without the title for the first time. I didn't walk into your throne room 3 weeks ago because I was thinking about political ramifications. I walked in because no one should be forgotten. No one should be invisible. I squeezed her hand, least of all you. She made a sound I had never heard from a Valori before, something between a sob and a laugh. And then, slowly, carefully, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to mine. In my culture, she murmured, this is how we share truth. How we show that we are hiding nothing. And what truth are you sharing? That I am terrified. Her breath was warm against my skin, that I have not felt this way in 200 years. That some part of me, wants to send you away forever, and another part wants to keep you so close that nothing could ever take you from me. That sounds complicated. It is insufferably complicated. She pulled back slightly, just enough to meet my eyes. But if you are willing to stay despite the complications, then perhaps I am willing to stop pretending I don't want you to. I should have said something eloquent, something worthy of the moment. Instead, I smiled and said, "Happy birthday, Selahari. I got you a bottle of wine." She laughed, a real laugh, bright and startled, and for that moment, the assassin on the floor, the political catastrophe brewing around us, the 200 years of isolation she carried like armor, all of it fell away. There was just a woman, and a man, and a connection that neither of them had expected to find. The Council of Noble Houses convened 3 days later. Selahari had anticipated their response to the assassination attempt. The failure of her security, the presence of a human in her private study at the time of the attack, the rumors already spreading through the palace, all of it had given her enemies exactly what they needed. "The Empress has allowed sentiment to compromise her judgment," Lord Vaynthor declared, his voice echoing through the grand chamber. "She has permitted an alien species unfettered access to the most secure areas of the palace. She has abandoned the principles that have guided our civilization for millennia." I stood at the edge of the chamber, technically present as a diplomatic observer, but functionally on trial. The other nobles watched me with expressions ranging from contempt to curiosity. None of them expected me to speak. "Furthermore," Vaynthor continued, "she has violated the most sacred of our traditions by forming an emotional bond with a being from outside our species. This attachment weakens her, makes her vulnerable, and proves what many of us have suspected for years, that her extended reign has eroded the wisdom we once trusted." "You speak of my attachment," Selahari said quietly. She sat upon a smaller throne at the head of the chamber, her bearing imperial despite the accusations. "Tell me, Lord Vaynthor, when did attachment become a crime? When it compromises leadership? When it endangers the Dominion? And how, precisely, has my friendship with the human attaché endangered the Dominion?" Vaynthor's eyes narrowed. "You ask this after an assassin nearly killed you in your own study, an assassin who was hired by members of this very council." Selahari's voice sharpened. "Oh, did you think I would not discover the truth? The assassin carried a blade forged in the foundries of House Vaynthor. The communication codes in their possession traced back to your private network." She rose from her throne. "You plotted to murder your Empress and blame it on human influence. You have committed treason." The chamber erupted in chaos. Guards moved toward Vaynthor, but his supporters rose from their seats, hands reaching for weapons. For a moment, the entire fragile structure of Velori civilization seemed ready to collapse into civil war. And then I did something that probably should have gotten me killed. I walked into the center of the chamber and started talking. 200 years ago, I said, my voice somehow cutting through the chaos, your Empress took the throne during the worst crisis in your history. She stabilized your economy, rebuilt your military, negotiated peace with 17 hostile powers. She did all of this alone, because your traditions told her that isolation was strength. The shouting died down. Vaynthor stared at me with undisguised hatred. "What would a human know of our traditions?" he spat. "I know that traditions exist to serve people, not the other way around. I know that your Empress has given 2 centuries of her life to this civilization, and in return, she has received nothing but duty and silence, and the occasional assassination attempt." I turned in a slow circle, meeting the eyes of every noble in the chamber. "I know that she is the wisest, most capable leader I have ever encountered, and that she has been doing this job while carrying a loneliness that would have broken anyone else." "You presume too much," another noble said. "You are nothing. A minor functionary from a minor species. Maybe. But I'm also the only person in this room who had the courage to tell your Empress the one thing she needed to hear." I looked at Selahari. "That she deserves to be seen. That she deserves to be valued. That 200 years of perfect service doesn't mean she has to be alone forever." The chamber fell silent. Selahari stood very still, her patterns shifting in ways I couldn't interpret. But her eyes were locked on mine, and in them I saw something I had never expected to see from the most powerful being in the Velori Dominion. Hope. "Lord Vaynthor," she said, her voice carrying the full weight of imperial authority, "you are under arrest for high treason. Your holdings are forfeit, your title stripped. Take him. The guards moved. This time, Vainthor's supporters did not resist. They had seen the evidence in their Empress's eyes, not just her conviction, but her renewed strength. Whatever had been broken in her had begun to mend. The trial concluded within the hour. The conspirators were identified, their plots unraveled. And when the chamber finally emptied, Silahari descended from her throne and crossed to where I stood. That was extraordinarily foolish, she said. Speaking before the noble council without recognition, addressing them as if you had any right. I know, I'm sorry, do not apologize. She reached out and took my hand, both of her upper hands clasping mine. No one has ever defended me like that, not once in 2 centuries. Then your nobles have been idiots for 2 centuries. She laughed, that bright, startled sound I was beginning to love. Perhaps. But you? She stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. You are something else entirely, Marcus Cole. I'm a junior attaché from a minor species. You are the man who walked into my throne room uninvited. Who gave me a cake on my birthday? Who attacked a trained assassin with a decorative sculpture, and then held my hand while I cried? Her patterns were glowing now, pulsing with colors I was finally starting to understand. You are against all logic and tradition, the person I have chosen. Chosen? It is not precisely a proposal, not yet. Her eyes met mine. But in Velori custom, when an empress declares someone as chosen, it means that she has found the one she will stand beside. The one who will share her burdens and her joys. The one who will never leave her forgotten again. I reached up with my free hand and gently touched her face, her cheek, where the patterns pulsed brightest. In human custom, I said, we have something similar. It's called love. Love. She spoke the word carefully, as if tasting it. Is that what this is? I think so. I'm not entirely sure. I've never been very good at this. But I know that I don't want to be anywhere you're not. I know that when you smile, I feel like the luckiest person in the galaxy. And I know that if anyone ever tries to hurt you again, I will hit them with whatever decorative object is closest at hand. Silahari made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. And then, before I could say anything else, she leaned down and pressed her lips to mine. The kiss was gentle, careful, 2 beings from different worlds learning a new language together. Her skin was warm, her touch electric, and in that moment, I understood why her people considered physical contact sacred. When we finally parted, she rested her forehead against mine once more. No one had told her happy birthday in 200 years, she murmured. But perhaps that was because she had not yet met the person whose words would matter. Happy birthday, Silahari. It is not my birthday. I know, but I plan to tell you anyway. Every day. For as long as you'll let me. She smiled, that rare, brilliant smile that transformed her entire face. That may be a very long time, Marcus Cole. My species lives for centuries. Then, I guess I'll have to make every year count. Outside the window, the frozen mountains caught the light of 3 distant suns, scattering rainbows across the sky. And somewhere in the palace below, servants were already whispering about the human who had won the Empress's heart and changed the course of an empire with nothing more than a cake and a willingness to see. Some bonds, it turned out, could not be measured by protocol or tradition or the weight of 200 years. Some bonds simply needed someone brave enough to begin.